this is a story for all of us. It tells a story of a transformative era, an era that speaks to so many generations, and not just an Egyptian story, maybe a story of the region as well. So I want to jump into the conversation. We don't have a lot of time, but I want to briefly introduce who I'm with. Sahar Asaf, Executive Artistic Director of Golden Thread Production and Director, playwright. Playwright Adam Ashraf Asayev, who's right next to me. And dramaturg Sam Nazilati. I want to give each of you a brief minute to just introduce yourselves, share your pronouns if you like, and if you're comfortable, your connection to the story.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Asayev. I use he, him pronouns, and because I wrote this play, and I'm one of the Latin Fellows, which is how this play came to be here, which I'm so grateful and excited about. Being an Egyptian queer person, I think this is one of those. It is one of my first plays, and it's the play that, while writing, I felt like this is the play that I would have loved to see when I was 12, or that I wish I saw. But yeah, I guess that's my connection to the story. I'll pass it to Sahar.
Thank you, Adam. My name is Sahar Asaf, she, her. I'm the director of this play. It's actually part of my first season as artistic director of Golden Thread Productions. So yeah, Salma.
Hi everyone, my name is Salma Zahdi, pronoun she, her, hers. I am the dramaturg on this piece, but I've heard a lot about different narrations of this play long before Sahar called me to be on this. I've also been friends with Adam before Sahar called me to be on this, so I'm Egyptian as well. I'm of the generation of these guys. So, you know, personal connections and professional connections to this work.
Thank you. Sahar, if I may, I want to ask you first, who was this play written for? And what does it mean to be presented here? And how has it maybe been adjusted for different contexts and audiences?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the last bit of the question in terms of adjustments, and probably Adam would speak better about this, and also Salma, because that was one of the bigger conversations that we had as we were, workshopping the play and getting it ready for the production, and that is the question of language, because Adam wrote this play with a bigger chunk of Arabic than what we saw tonight. And obviously we were producing it in San Francisco to majority English-speaking audiences, and we use English at Golden Thread as kind of the language that would make the piece more inclusive. It will, we don't want to isolate obviously certain communities in the work that we produce. So that was a big conversation, and we had different solutions because we wanted to keep the Arabic present in the play. In Adam's mind, the characters are actually bilingual, and there are certain scenes where they would be speaking in both languages, not one language. So at some point we even contemplated and literally tried with having the Arabic projected when the characters are actually speaking in Arabic, and then we dropped that because it did not work. That in terms of adjustments, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Who is this play written for? I think for everyone. I mean, I read this play and I had an immediate connection to I'm not Egyptian, I'm Lebanese, I'm not gay. I dedicate this play in my director's note to my son, who's 3 years old, because it broke my heart seeing him in those characters, who were in those, persons really that were crushed by a system that's oppressing them just as they were starting to live life at length. I don't think you need to be a certain person to connect with the story. And that is the beauty, and that is the power of this play.
Adam, you've portrayed the lives of 3 gay men in this play, but along these lines, lines, would you say that it also speaks to societal challenges for communities in Egypt that get othered beyond queer people?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll go from this question to this one a little bit because I think they relate. I think for me, I wrote this play for a queer Egyptian audience specifically. And at that point, it was before me moving to the United States, and in a way that was really liberating because I was in a place in my life where I didn't know really where I was going to be, and so I was writing for myself, which meant also automatically leading to writing the most vulnerable version of the story. And then things like language or things like this reference to this thing makes sense, like these things could be adjusted later. But to echo this question, I think one of my biggest grievances and challenges with so much gay literature, but also so much literature about the Middle East is that like it forgets that the people are also people. They're not just Arab or not just gay or not just, I don't know, something. And so to me, I was like, the things that frustrate me or the things that I experience as different kinds of oppression are also things that are intersected with just being in the world. And it's not like under this regime and under this system, straight people don't experience some of these oppressions as well. And so I was thinking like, in a world where all of them are gay, the tensions between them don't become about being gay. That's the tensions with the outside world. But what do we get to see besides that? And so, and I think I'm very conscious of my positionality as like a cis gay man who's like, comes from a fairly upper middle class context. And I was like, what does it mean for the story to include trans people? Or what does it mean for the story to represent like the challenges that Khalid's sister is having with her husband? And that's just like dropped there. So that we feel like everyone else in this world is also, or like why was Moody's mom such a bad mom to him? Like what was going on in her life? And so I was really interested in the question of, in seeing these people as gay people, but also as humans. And the same thing applying them to Arabness as well. Like to me, the fact that they are in their context somehow also influences them. The revolution influences them, even though the revolution was not explicitly invoking anything about queerness, but that becomes part of who they are in this world. They're not just in this world because they're gay. So yeah.
And I think that really came through. And it's so clear, I think, for those of us who maybe aren't queer, maybe don't identify with the characters exactly as they are, there were still so many ways to connect with them. And I think that's really the power. So, I appreciated that. Sedna, I want to invite you into the conversation, and I want to ask you a little bit about the show and the context, the political and social context in which it takes place. Obviously, the show depicts what many of us know to be one of the most significant moments for LGBTQI plus modern history in Egypt, the Queen Boat incident, but it also depicts a number of other significant incidents, be it the revolution, like Adam was just saying. Can I invite you to just reflect a little bit about the political and social context for Egypt and for the region that this is all taking place in? I know, a large question for maybe a minute or two, but...
Yeah, I mean, it was a rich time. I think it was really, it's an unusual time to be in Egypt. And speak for myself, I can't speak for other generations, but from 1997 all the way to 2015, so much has happened. Just a simple, I would say simple example is that till 2011, I was 26 and I had only had one president. And in the course of 3 years, I've witnessed the revolution, I've witnessed military crackdown, I've witnessed discrimination against multiple communities firsthand. I've witnessed a constitutional rewritten, like a constitutional referendum, a constitutional rewritten, 2 presidential elections, and the coup, like, so much has happened just in this like short, it's like a time capsule of time between 2011 until 2015, and it moved. Like, and there's much more happened. I wouldn't say much more happened, but a lot has happened also after that. I know this, like for the LGBTQI community specifically, I'll say just, yes, the Queen Boat incident was the inciting incident, but but then there were arrests in 2008. There has been the bathhouse incident that was mentioned in the play, and then 2017 there was the Mashura Laila concert where the rainbow flag was raised, and Egypt basically witnessed one of the largest crackdowns on the same community, which had led to more tragedies later down the line. So I don't even know where to start to answer that question, but this is the backdrop of this world, even though it's not really, we don't delve into it in details, and it has an indirect, I think I would say, it has an indirect impact on these characters' lives, but it was just in the backdrop of everyone's lives. So yeah, and there was, I'll just chronicle one moment I think I witnessed. In 2011 in December, we were marching, and the revolution had already happened, and there has been multiple massacres and multiple breakdowns, and we were marching in Cairo, and we went to neighborhoods, we were marching in neighborhoods that I would say were more on the periphery of Cairo, and there were people who still believed back at the time that Mubarak was still in power. So also there's like parallel worlds. So yeah, I deviated, I know, but just this is the context of that world, yeah.
And I think these parallel worlds, to me at least, came through a lot in the play itself. Even the way when the characters were kind of talking over each other, or at different points kind of having parallel conversations. For me, what you just said kind of invoked that. I want to ask a little bit more about the play, maybe Sahar and Adam, if you want to weigh in on this. What have been maybe some of the challenges or negotiations that you've had to make to pursue an artistic practice at the intersection of politics and social justice?
I mean, I think many of you know about this and I speak about this, but I think I actually usually hate to talk about this because I hate to somehow be precious about my work or make my work sound like self-important by virtue of what I'm about to say. But I think every like time there's a post or every time there's a retweet of something or like being on this stage, I'm constantly cognizant that like there may be a world out there where someone is monitoring and I don't know. And every time I like go home, if I'm able to go home, there's a question of like, will I pass through the airport? And so there does come a real compromise, and I know that with certain projects that I'm looking at taking on, or writing other plays, or if this play is produced on more and more platforms, I'm cognizant that that does essentially mean a compromise of access to mobility, access to safety, potentially safety of family, and so they're all real costs, and yet to me, the impact of the number of people who have seen the play and have expressed that they saw themselves represented in a way they may have not before, or a specific experience of feeling like they're able to share it with their family members to express something that they may not express, which people have expressed to me on a number of occasions. That to me, ultimately, there's a certain, again, it's like the thing I wish I saw when I was 13, and ultimately that makes it worth it for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, to speak about this play in particular, like, I think this play, ideally, I'd love to present this play in Lebanon or in Egypt, but we know that this cannot happen. And I felt, again, like saying what Adam said, I don't want to sound pretentious, but I felt like a responsibility, I call it thread, towards this play and similar plays, and so that's what we've been doing for more than 2 decades, and that's what we're going to continue to do. We're creating space for stories that maybe don't have access to stages, like mainstream stages, or stages, let's say, in the Middle East. And I, as a practitioner of theater in Lebanon, I mean, this has been, like dealing with censorship has been a big challenge, if we're talking about challenges, but honestly, I it's something that you learn to negotiate and to work around and to find ways. I mean, the censorship here comes in different forms, through subscribers or board members or whatnot, right? And you also learn how to work around that. So, and also like what I had to negotiate personally, again, as a theater maker, like I've always felt that doing theater under certain regimes or in certain situations when your personal safety is not necessarily because of the work that you're doing, right? I mean, I give a simple example. In 2015, we were producing the Lebanese adaptation of Tracy Letts' August Osage County. Nothing to do with family dysfunctions or whatnot. Like, it's not a political play at all, but just the fact that explosions were happening. We had to close down, because of an explosion that claimed the lives of 40 people, or many times you can't make it to the rehearsal room because of art conflict or whatnot. So if the theater event in itself becomes political. Just the fact that you're going out there and producing the work becomes like a political statement of positive resilience, right? So
I'm cognizant that we're at time, or close to time, but I just want to share, to me, what I said earlier, which is the thing of like this, I have this moment or this anecdote, which again can seem very self-indulgent, and it makes it feel like the work matters. But one of the, speaking of context, my favorite memory of this play, and I think like no matter where this play goes, that memory will always be my favorite memory of this play, is about 6 months into me writing it. It was like a second draft. It was longer and even messier than it is now. And I was in Egypt, and a friend was like, I really want to direct this, a reading of it. And I was like, how? And he just made a poster that was very subtle and sent it to a bunch of Facebook friends through Facebook Messenger. And on a very hot night in Ramadan, we did not have AC, and there were 50 or 60 of us in a very small apartment. And people just like people who read it earlier that day read it. And sometimes it can feel like censorship is ridiculous because does art really have an impact? Or why are we even doing this? Or this doesn't matter. But the fact that like these 60 people actually took a risk to be in that room, because if the wrong person was in that room, they would have, who knows what would have happened to them, but they still chose to make that risk. And so it's worthwhile for people, audiences. And to me, even in that context, it's worthwhile to the audience, then I feel like it's a responsibility for it to be worthwhile for us.
I want to ask one final question, and then we'll see if we can squeeze in audience questions, but it's a little tight. Selma, and leading off of what Adam just said, the play stops in 2015. What would life be like for Moody, Fed, and Zaha today, taking into account class, sexual orientation, politics, what we see in Egypt and what we see in the region?
To these characters. So, so I'll try to Taha, I think, Taha would continue to advocate for human rights from abroad. Moody's tricky for me, and also I'll ask which Moody, because there are two other Moodys in the play. I keep on thinking about that question as far as Moody is concerned. Khaled, however, I'd see him still being complacent, working within the system, but I would say that as a parent, I think he'll be very different than his father. And that is, I think that moment when he was talking to his son is that he might utilize his power in a way to protect his son in ways that his father didn't do. So that's where I think they are right now. But I'm happy to keep thinking about this question and answering it because it's not definitive.
Yeah, I mean, I won't speak to the three characters as three characters, but I'll speak I also won't speak for the community, but I will say that, I mean, a lot of my friends who said they would never leave Egypt at a certain point have left. And I'm not in Egypt, I'm not judging that. But there's a reason for that. And Selma and I are potentially collaborating on another project, and a central question that I keep asking her is like, what makes a person keep having hope. And to me, that is, I don't get it, because I often don't have hope. And so to me, it's compelling to see the people who have stayed and the choice they've made to stay. And then for those who don't want to stay, who has the privilege to leave. So I think it's very possible that Muhi may have left. I think Taha possibly would have left. And there are people not represented by these three characters, because these three characters don't represent every experience, who want to leave and can't. And that's important to think of that as well. So, yeah.
Do we have any quick audience questions?
Okay, should I just? Yes, hi. I just wanted to say that I really loved the show. I think it was brilliant. What I felt was a bit unfortunate, in my opinion, was the audience. If you look around, you know, it's such a brilliant piece, and it's a very small audience. It's a small fraction of a certain DC elite bubble that got a notification about it. So question to you, I would love to see this room filled with Egyptians from Virginia, from Maryland, you know, Tante Salwa قاعدة هناك زي عندي, you know, الحاج سالم بتاع Virginia برضه, you know, like literally, because I think this is ultimately what needs to happen. In fact, you have only displayed one side of the story. There is the other side of the 80–90% of men, women, fathers, mothers, who don't even know that someone is gay and who just keep wondering. And I think confronting them with something like this would be a cool idea.
What's next, maybe, for Drowning in Cairo?
I mean, it's less about what's next for Drowning in Cairo, and it's more about, like, I didn't have an understanding of who attended the theater when I first moved to the US. So actually, at Golden Thread, in 2018, when we had our very first reading, I didn't know who attended the theater. And so in my head, I was like, this is a Middle Eastern theater. Like, this is going to be really bad. Everyone's going to come and be, like, very upset. And my assumption about who was going to be attending the theater was something. And part of what's been great, but also frustrating to me, is that the audience are all deeply welcoming and embracing of the story. And that's great. And I'm also like, I know some of you are not out there and not like fighting with me because you're not here. And how do we get you here? It's the question of how do you like find the person who actually needs to see this play.
That's always the struggle, really, with theater. Those who need to see the play don't get to see it. Right?
I'm going to ask one final question to each of you and give you the space to do closing thoughts, because I know we got to be out of here soon. We're in an audience here, that was said before, a pretty like small DC bubble, but in the room maybe you have an audience of policy professionals, of journalists, of educators, of advocates. And so there's a unique opportunity maybe to think a little bit about action, or what we can do as a collective audience. And I'm curious if you can reflect a little bit about what each of us can do to make sure that stories like this and lived realities like the ones that you presented to us today get centered in the arts and get centered in each of our respective fields as well. If we want to do Adam, Sahar, and Selma, and perhaps any closing thoughts you want to share.
This is the best version of this question. I just want to say that, because it's asked with nuance and specificity. That question comes in every talkback in a much more frustrating way usually, which is like, what do we do to help gays in Egypt? You know, the poor gays of Egypt. And I don't know, I struggled with that for years, to a point that I almost thought to not present this play in the United States, because, you know, with the risk when you tell a story about an oppressed minority group in a third world post-colonial country, in this context, there's always the like, you're telling the audience, look, your life is so much better, you're so much more progressive and tolerant and whatever. And so I often really struggled with that question and how to answer it. And I someone smarter than me has an answer that I printed and that I always keep in my pocket for talkbacks. Because no, it literally, I have never been in a talkback with this play where some version of this question has not been asked. So I've had this in my wallet for literal years. So no. Again, your framing is much more nuanced than how that question typically is. But yeah, that's my little shtick, so let's go for it. So this is from Ale Abdel Fattah, who is a political prisoner who is incarcerated to this day in Egypt. And he has a book of his writings where it's translated and anthologized recently. And this is an excerpt from his speech to RightsCon in Silicon Valley in 2011, which is actually just a few months after the start of the revolution. Quote, "Fix your own democracy. This has always been my answer to the question, how can we help? I still believe it's the only possible answer. Not only is where you live, work, vote, pay tax, and organize the place where you have more influence, but a setback for human rights in a place where democracy has deep roots is certain to be used as an excuse for even worse violations in societies where rights are more fragile. I trust recent events made it evident that there is much that needs fixing. I look forward to being inspired by how you go about it. Don't play the game of nations. We lose much when you allow your work to be used as an instrument of foreign policy, no matter how benign your current ruling coalition is. We risk much when human rights advocacy becomes a weapon in a Cold War. We reach out to you not in search of powerful allies, but because we confront the same global problems and share universal values with a firm belief in the power of solidarity. Defend complexity and diversity. No change to the structure of or organization of the internet can make my life safer. What the internet has truly changed is not political dissent, but rather social dissent. We must protect it as a safe space where people can experiment with gender and sexual identities, explore what it means to be gay or a single mom or an atheist or a Christian in the Middle East, but also what it means to be black and angry in the US, or to be Muslim and ostracized in Europe, or to be a coal miner in a world that must cut back on greenhouse gases. So again, this is from Ale Abdel Fattah. Everyone read his book.
I think it's hard to follow that. Thank you, Adam, for that. I don't know Alet personally, but I know his family, and I know he would be really proud for you to have quoted him on this speech. I don't think there's much to say other than that, but I want to thank each of you so much. I want to thank you for your insights. I want to thank the audience for their engagement. And again, join me in giving a round of applause. Woo!